Welcome to a Legendarium special about Edgar Allan Poe's great mystery story, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. The Murders in the Rue Morgue, a short story written by Edgar Allan Poe, was first published in Graham's Magazine in 1841 at the age of 32. It is considered one of the first detective stories in the English language. In Europe, people tend to say in the street rather than on the street, and of course rue is the French word for street, and morgue is the French word for a place for keeping corpses. So the title is effectively The Murders on Charnel Street, charming indeed. It is worth noting that the Paris morgue during Poe's time was a public place where people would go to view unclaimed corpses that the authorities found in the streets. Inured to death during that hard time, Parisians would gawk at corpses and even speculate about their cause of death, perhaps something that inspired this story. Poe himself used the term ratiocination to describe his story. The 19th century word describes the process of logical deduction. Despite becoming famous for stories about supernatural terror with no clear explanation, Poe believed that the everyday world could be understood by scientific study. This story sprang from Poe's long-standing interest in puzzles and secret codes called cryptographs. Poe regularly published and decoded cryptographs in the pages of the Southern Literary Messenger. He even dared his readers to submit a code that he could not decipher. Poe would even create fake personalities who sent in puzzles that he, of course, would promptly solve in order to grow his fame. The story opens in Paris during the recent past. Poe omits the year, keeping up the 18th century custom of pretending fictional events are actually true, and thus certain details must be withheld to protect the innocent. Victor Hugo himself used this technique when writing Les Miserables. The story opens with the narrator, who remains unnamed and unknown, talking of how he met the genteel but impoverished C. Auguste Dupin. Soon thereafter, the narrator and Dupin read about a horrible murder in the aptly named Rue Morgue. At 3 a.m., the neighbors of Madame L'Espanaye and her daughter Camille awoke to shrieks from their fourth-floor apartment. They find Camille stuffed up the chimney, apparently choked to death. Madame L'Espanaye is later found in a courtyard, badly beaten and her throat cut. When the police try to move her remains, the head tumbled off. The 4,000 francs that Madame L'Espanaye just withdrew from the bank are still in the apartment, ruling out robbery as a motive. Soon after, the police arrest a man named Adolphe Lebon, a clerk who once did Dupin a favor. Dupin thus becomes interested in the case and gets permission from the police to search the crime scene. Dupin suggests that the police have been so distracted by the horrible murder and the apparent lack of a motive that they overlooked some things. First, he notes that the police overlooked the windows in the apartment, one of which is broken. Therefore, the killer could have entered through the window, but could have only vaulted from a nearby lightning rod outside, a feat that no man could possibly do. He also notes that the witnesses heard a shrill voice speaking a language they did not understand, but assumed to be Spanish. Dupin notes they may not have heard words, only sounds. After drawing a picture of the size and shape of the hand that killed the two women, Dupin reveals his solution. The hand matches not a human hand, but the paw of an orangutan. Dupin then advertises the safe capture of an orangutan, news that he believes will draw out its owner. When the owner, a sailor, arrives at his apartment, Dupin draws his pistol and demands everything the sailor knows about the murders, though Dupin assures the sailor that he believes him to be innocent. The sailor expedition around the world, he entered a foreign market and purchased an orangutan being sold by a merchant. He brought the orangutan on board the ship, and it grew in size and temper until it injured one of the sailor's crewmates for taunting it. The captain then forced both the sailor and the orangutan to disembark in Paris, where the sailor rented an apartment, and kept the orangutan in a closet. Unfortunately, the orangutan escaped one night, snatched a razor from the sailor's hand as he was shaving, and then disappeared into the night. The sailor followed the orangutan and watched him climb the lightning rod and leap into the window. Because he did not possess the animal's agility, the sailor could only watch as the orangutan slashed Madame L'Espagnier's throat and then choked Camille. Before escaping the apartment, the orangutan threw Madame L'Espagnier's body into the courtyard below. The sailor thus confirms the identity of the mysterious voice. The shrill shrieks came not from a man, but an orangutan. When informed of Dupin's solution, the police release Adolphe Laban. The prefect of police is unable to conceal his anger at being outwitted by Dupin, and this serves as the climax of the story. Poe viewed the realization of the murder by logic as being the true climax of the film, and the resolution is rather anticlimactic. The sailor tracks down the orangutan and then sells him to a zoo for a great deal of money. Poe's short story, like many of his other works, became more widely read and famous after his death. Edgar Allan Poe wrote 2 more stories about the hero detective C. Auguste Dupin. The first, The Mystery of Marie Rougette, is another murder mystery inspired by the real-life murder of a woman in New York, but the action is again moved to Paris. However, the third, The Purloined Letter, is one of Poe's most famous. Concerning a search for a stolen and hidden letter, it gives us one of Poe's most famous phrases, that the best place to hide something is in plain sight. The 3 Dupin stories helped to shape a new genre of detective fiction, from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes to Dame Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot. It has been adapted into film twice. The first film, made in 1932, stars Bela Lugosi, who previously played Count Dracula. Curiously, the film follows a mad scientist who tries to combine the blood of a human and an ape to prove kinship between the two, and kidnaps women as test subjects. The 1971 adaptation also takes great liberties with the source material. It follows a theater doing a production of Murders in the Rue Morgue that is plagued by a murderer who throws acid in the faces of his victims. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.